What's up, my wizards? It's Dev, Mtg. We like it a magic, and today I got something a little special for you. Not only am I going to catch you up on all the Ikoria previews that we've missed up to this point and clean that up, but I'm also going to show off my flashy exclusive preview that Wizards was nice enough to just give me. Hashtag free preview, so you know that no money exchanged hands. This video is not sponsored by Wizards of the Coast, and I am in no way an employee of WotC. I got to say all that. Actually, I only have to say the free preview thing. I'm just having some fun. So make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel if you want to do that. That'd be a really nice thing to do, and check out the Patreon. But let's go ahead and get into the most exciting part of the video, I guess. That's the brand new card you ain't gonna see nowhere else. Here it comes. Here's Bastion of Remembrance right here. This is 3 mana, 2 and a black for an enchantment. When Bastion of Remembrance enters the battlefield, you create a 1/1 white human soldier creature token. And here's the fun part: whenever a creature you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. Hey, you remember Blood Artists? Or maybe you remember Zulaport Cutthroat? Bastion of Remembrance members and immortalizes them pretty well. We already have stuff like this in Standard at the moment, actually. Things like Cruel Celebrant, Judith, Scourge Diva, love me some Judith. And I guess if you want to look at it sideways, Mayhem Devil exists too, and it's kind of like a thing like that, but this just adds more fuel to the fire if you want to play an Aristocrats type deck, and it's got the benefit of being a lot harder to remove than a creature is. But it also gives you a creature for like sacrificial purposes, I assume, and that's pretty cool. They didn't have to do that. This could have just as easily been a basically do nothing 3 mana enchantment, at which point I wouldn't be near as excited, but the fact that it gives you a creature really pushes this in playability to me. I know it's just a 1/1, but at least it does something when it enters the battlefield. Now, I'm probably most interested in just playing this in a straight mono black deck. Other color combinations have things like Cruel Celebrant and Judith and whatnot, but in just straight mono black, you don't have a lot of effects like this that are fairly costed. Vindictive Vampire's in Standard right now, and it's one above this on the curve, but it costing 4 mana has always completely killed any playability that card might have. You don't want your Zulaport Cutthroat or your Blood Artist to cost double what it should cost. I'm okay with paying 3 mana for it and getting a creature out of it too, especially considering, again, it's a lot harder to actually remove off the battlefield than a Zulaport Cutthroat would have been. The only issue that I have with it in that straight up mono black deck that I want to play it in is that it might be tough to fit it into the curve in the 3-drop slot. You have to play at least 3, if not 4 copies of Iara. 4 whole copies of Woe Strider is pretty much a guarantee. At least 2 or 3 copies of Midnight Reaper, maybe a couple of copies of Murderous Rider. So you can't play all the 3-drops, but I still think you might be able to find room for 1 or 2 of this if you're going full-on Aristocrats. Might be worth it to you. Just like Iara in the 3-drop slot, this adds an extra damage, basically doubling the effectiveness of the Cauldron Familiar Witch's Oven combo, which might be a pretty nice thing to have on turn 3. Just a 5th or 6th copy of Iara that's not legendary. It also fits kind of nicely into the burgeoning Abzan, or maybe even just Orzhov Aristocrat shell that we're seeing take shape as we move through these spoilers here. We just saw General Kudro the other day, and if you wanted to go Abzan, we saw Death's Oasis, which looks like a pretty good Aristocrats card as well. Running into the same problem where we can't play all the 3-drops in the world, right? But at the same time, a card like Remembrance looks pretty decent. Because you can't play, I mean, I guess you could, but you probably don't want to play things like Cruel Celebrant in this Abzan Aristocrats deck because it's not a human, and you mostly want to play humans, so this kind of solves that problem. You can't play things like Iara in that deck because it costs triple black, and not every creature you play is going to be black, so again, this looks a little bit better than some of the stuff that we usually see in Aristocrats decks, just specifically in the context of the Abzan Humans deck. Or conversely, just make a black-white Aristocrats deck without any sort of human conceit to it whatsoever, you know, just nix General Kudro. And now you've got access again to stuff like Midnight Reaper, and you've got access to Cruel Celebrant and whatnot. So I see a world where it's possible to play, you know, Cruel Celebrant into this on the next turn, and then eventually you play a Bantu, and you sacrifice like everything, and suddenly you just deal like 12, 14, 16 damage to the opponent all in one shot and in the game with your Bantu because you've got so many of these effects on the table at the same time. Now, that's all I have to say about this for now, at least, but give me any ideas that you've got down there in the comments section. But I'm going to go ahead and move on to the rest of the stuff that we missed both yesterday and from this morning. And I'll start with a big old one. Here's Bosh the Burrower right here. That's a name. It costs 3 and then 2 black-red hybrids. So 5 mana for a legendary Hellion Horror. It's a 3/5, and it's one of these companion things. Each non-land card in your starting deck must have an odd converted mana cost if you're going to play this as your companion. Whenever a source you control with an odd converted mana cost deals any damage, you double that damage instead. So this is, at least, very cool, but I don't think that it's like super playable. Again, I don't like skipping out on whole spots on the curve. I don't want to skip out on 2 drops and 4 drops and even 6 drops. But I will say I've been having a tough time discerning which one I'd rather skip out on. We saw the one the other day that makes you play only even converted mana costs. And it's actually kind of tough. I think that I'd rather skip out on playing odds, though. All things considered. I think it's more important to be able to play 2 and 4 drops in this standard than it is to play 1 and 3 drops. Mostly that's determined by the fact that the 2 drops are very, very important, and 1 drops just aren't as important. So, especially given their 2 effects, I think I'd much rather play the Demon Kraken, but this is at least like super interesting, and it lets you play stuff like Slaying Fire and Risk Factor and all kinds of stuff. At the odd converted mana cost, even 1 mana stuff, you know, and Skewer the Critics, which is effectively 1 and 3 mana, right? So just getting double damage out of those things seems like it might be worth it, but you also have to get to the point in the game where you can actually cast this out of exile or out of your sideboard, really, is how Companion works. So that might be tough, but honestly, this is one of those that I'm more interested in just playing in my deck. You know, just completely ignoring the deck building restriction. Don't care if it's my companion. Just include it in the 60 of my starting deck, and then when you play it on turn 5, actually it could be pretty insane when you think about it. When you swing with, you know, 1 and 3 drop creatures, or maybe other 5 drop creatures at that point, and you double the damage from them, that's like kind of having a Furnace of Wrath for specific, you know, casting costs. And that can be really hot, pardon the pun, but even just again with you untap with it and play, and you start throwing direct damage spells at your opponent's face, 8 damage for a Slaying Fire seems pretty freaking sweet to me. So this might actually be a sweet card to just play, or like maybe you play it in fires. Hear me out here, because you play your fires on turn 4, and then on turn 5 you can play Cavalier Flame and this, and suddenly you just swing for all of the damage. Maybe that's what you're supposed to do with this card, actually, because they both, Cavalier Flame and this both have odd converted mana costs. So you play them, give them haste, and then you GG. So actually, I'm talking myself into this card. But let's move on to Riel the Everwise here. This is 3 mana, 1 a blue and a red for a 0/3 human wizard. Yep. Go. Well, let's move on to Riel the Everwise here. This is 3 mana, 1 a blue and a red for a 0/3 legendary human wizard. And Riel the Everwise gets +1/+0 for each instant and sorcery card in your graveyard. Whenever you discard 1 or more cards for the first time each turn, draw that many cards. So I was just talking mad junk about Channeled Force the other day, but this actually makes Channeled Force look like kind of playable. just a little bit. I like this a good bit. Plus, this works with anything like Tormenting Voice, Royal Scions. There's a ton of things. So many things that make you discard your own cards in this format, man. And obviously this works well as a sideboard piece against discard decks, but I actually think that's going to be like the least of its applications completely. Things like Thirst for Meaning that make you discard your own cards. That is going to be where it's at here. I'll bring up Cavalier Flame again. Let's say you turn 3 this, eventually Cavalier Flame, and suddenly you're going to draw a bunch of cards when you discard your lands. So there's just a lot of applications for this card in Standard, but all that said, I'm not sure how good it actually is. Taking your turn 3 off to play this card just doesn't really seem like the best use of a turn 3 in Standard right now. Even if you are able to play, turn 1 spell, turn 2 2 spells, and you get a 3/3 out of it, I'm still not 100% convinced this is amazing. Its toughness never goes above 3. We just saw a card that, exiles creatures forever for 2 mana, and, they lose life equal to the creature's toughness. That makes things like this and Anax like a lot worse looking, because that card's probably going to see a lot of play. But, that's just one answer to it in the format. There are dozens of answers to this card in the format before it gets too big. And it's just kind of a grounded Crackling Drake, sort of, like it's entirely possible that Crackling Drake's ETB trigger ends up drawing you more cards than this does over the course of a game, because it's got a huge target on its back, and it's pretty easy to deal with for the most part. So I'm just not entirely sure that this is, Standard playable. It might be a really fun commander, or I might just be an idiot, and there's just like too many ways to discard cards effectively in this format. Again, Royal Scions, Thirst for Meaning. Like these are great. These are great playable cards. Tormenting Voice, whatever. Jump starting stuff like Radical Idea, Chemister's Insight. That'll make you draw more cards. I mean, all of these seem like really, really good applications, but they require an awful lot of setup, and I just think there's probably better things you could be doing, all in Standard. And this kind of seems kind of a little small ball in comparison. So, you know, again, up against decks like Fires, for instance, I'm just not really sure how well this stacks up. Against decks like, you know, Mono Red, I'm not sure how well, you know, how good playing this on turn 3 is actually going to be. I want the card to be great, and I think there's a ton of applications for it, but it kind of looks budgety, janky against the oddsy to me, but we'll have to wait and see. Now up next is Mythos of Braco. I love how it kind of rhymes with itself. This is 4 mana, 2 and 2 green for a sorcery, and I'm actually going to read it in reverse order because I feel like it makes more sense that way. Return up to 2 permanent cards from your graveyard to your hand. If blue-black was used to cast this spell, search your library for a card and put it into your graveyard, then shuffle your library. Alright, so if you spend Sultai on this, it's not terrible, but it also doesn't really affect the board in any way. The cards go back to your hand. I've seen a lot of people like mistaking for thinking that you put the cards into play. That would be nuts. That would be like the best card in the set. But no, the cards just go back to your hand, and it is pretty nice if you can pay the Sultai and get like an Entomb effect before you put the cards into your hand. So you're just basically tutoring anything up and putting it into your hand for 4 mana, which is okay, but it's also just like Diabolic Intent or whatever, Diabolic Tutor. And it's not amazing, you know. I guess it gets you card advantage, whereas Tutor doesn't. So there is that, and this probably is pretty good in the late game in a Sultai deck because, you know, most Sultai decks are based on the escape theme right now, so you got plenty of stuff in your graveyard at most points in the game to get back. But the permanent restriction is hurtful in some ways. You can't get back like a Growth Spiral in Sultai, and that might hurt. But for that matter, you can't get back a Casualties of War, and that kind of sucks, but you can get back a Tameo, a Vraska, any number of creatures. So, you know, maybe it's actually insane. You can't get back an Eero. You can get back an Eero, put it into your hand, but that's not as good as escaping it 90% of the time. So, you know, I'm just not sure. Although getting back a Hydroid Krasis seems great. Getting back a Nissa seems good. But all this is going to happen in the very, very late game, so you're probably not going to play more than one copy of this. And in most cases, I think Tameo is probably the better card anyway if you're trying to get stuff back from your yard. So I'm not actually sure that I can talk myself into liking this card as much as I want to. But a 4-mana tutor that creates card advantage is probably at least decent. But let's move into some sort of lower rarity stuff before we cap it off with the card I actually really like. Now here's Stormwild Caprador here. 3 mana, 2 and a white for a 1/3 bird goat. Nice. With flying. And if non-combat damage would be dealt to Stormwild Caprador, you prevent that damage. Put a +1/+1 counter on Stormwild Caprador for each 1 damage prevented this way. So, what is it? Marauding Raptor? Is that the name of the card? The 2 mana thing that hits every creature you play for 3 or for 2 when they enter the battlefield. So yeah, turn 3 you get like a 3/5. So it could be worse, but it could be a lot better too, probably. I don't think that one interaction is worth it, but I'm seeing this in a deck where you play like True Fire Captain on turn 4, and you also have Solar Blaze in the deck, so that maybe this is a fun like dank jank thing, but I don't think it goes much farther than that. But I'll move on to Footfall Crater. I like this thing. This is just 1 red mana for an aura that enchants a land. Enchanted land has tap. Target creature gains trample and haste until end of turn, but you can cycle this for just 1 mana. So I've said this before, I kind of automatically like any card you can cycle for 1 mana. I don't think this is going to end up seeing too much play unless it sees play, because it's in a deck that plays all the cards that cycle for 1 mana, for one reason or another. You know, some sort of new perspectives thing that's only interested in playing as many 1 mana cyclers as possible. That could be a deck. And we're definitely seeing a lot of them, but at the same time, this is just, you know, basically pay an extra mana to give a creature trample and haste, and that might be pretty decent, to be honest. You know, it's probably not going to get, like, blown away while it's on the stack, like the land that it targets isn't going to get blown away while it's on the stack 90% of the time. So it's pretty safe. It's not the same as, like, a creature aura. It's pretty hard to deal with. So, I don't know. I kind of like it, but I don't think it's going to be worth a slot in a lot of standard decks. Now, that said, might be a decent commander card in some ways, because it's kind of like another copy of like Swiftfoot Boots or something like that. Lightning Greaves, right? Because just another way to give your commander and other big creatures haste. And Trample's a nice bonus too. So, I do like the card. You got an extra mana laying around and you top deck a huge guy. Yeah, it seems good to me. And the cycling, make sure that it's like it could be worth a slot in the main deck, but I like the card. Let me just put it that way. I probably shouldn't talk about it too much. It's not that exciting. But up next, the translation for this is rough, but the name of the creature so far is Ikely. Ikely. It's 4 mana, 2, a black and a green for a 4/4 beast with mutate. Same almost as its casting cost. 2 and then 2 Golgari hybrids. When Ikely mutates, return target permanent from your graveyard to your hand. So it's another one of these. Golgari Finebroker. We saw a card like this in the Theros set. So, I guess Golgari has always gotten to do this. These are the two colors that bring stuff back from the graveyard to the hand, so it makes plenty of sense. But we get another one in this set. But honestly, Unlimited, a 4 mana 4/4, pretty decent stats in and of itself. Even if you don't mutate this, a 4 mana 4/4, you could do a lot worse, right? But if you do mutate it onto something, and you get something back from your graveyard to your hand, E-Witness style, it's not bad. Actually, it's a permanent, not any card, so do keep that in mind. Again, permanent restriction is a little ouch on this, but whatever. I'll take it. It's still probably a fine card in Limited for, invalidating opponent's removal and getting back big bombs and stuff like that. So I do like the card. I think it's a solid Limited playable, but time will tell if it's playable in Standard. I think if things like Golgari Finebroker aren't currently playable, they were at one point, but if they aren't currently playable, then I doubt that this will be. Although the stats are slightly better, so there's that. But up next, let's move on to Migratory Greathorn right here. This is 4 mana, 3 and a green for a 3/4 beast with mutate, 2 and a green, 3 mana. Whenever this creature mutates, search your library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, shuffle your library. I actually kind of think this might be slightly Standard playable. I think that Beanstalk Giant is probably the better deck, or the better card for most decks that want to play something like this. And I don't like that you have to have a creature in play to mutate this onto, but it shouldn't be too hard to have an Arboreal Grazer, or a Gilded Goose, or even a Paradise Druid that you can mutate this onto and go get a land but still have creatures that can tap for mana, or in the case of Arboreal Grazer, you're just giving it better stats. It already did its job, so it might actually be worth mutating this onto it, and suddenly your Arboreal Grazer can block and stuff. So that's actually not terrible. The 3 mana rate is really decent on this, and there will be times where, you just need a blocking body, so you play a 4 mana 3/4. There are going to be times where that happens too. Or again, just like upgrade an Arboreal Grazer, that seems like a pretty good play to me, so I actually think this could see some amount of Standard play, but in Limited, it's a really nice card. Again, the flexibility is nice on this. It fixes your mana as well, so good card right here, and it's nice to have all these lower rarity cards with Mutate. It's nice to have a common, for instance, with Mutate, because all of the stuff that does things when you mutate it, going to be a lot more easy to enable with all these common mutate creatures. So a lot of good things to like about this card, but I will go ahead and move on to the next card of the day. And that is Rooting Moloch. At least that's the translation so far. 5 mana, 4 and a red for a 4/4 lizard. And whenever it enters the battlefield, exile target card with a cycling ability from your graveyard. Until the end of your next turn, you may play that card. And of course, you can cycle Moloch for 2 mana as well. This is a hot card. I don't think that it's Standard playable. I don't think that it is. I'm not entirely certain, because honestly, the ability to cycle something early game and then play it anyway later might be worth it. Again, in very specific cycling-centric decks, this could actually be a key piece to a combo. So keep that in mind. This is actually a really, really interesting ability, because it lets you just let go of cards in the early game but still have access to them later. Cards like that are typically strong, but a 5 mana casting cost is a bit much, and in most cases you're going to have to wait until your next turn to play the card. That might not be good that late in the game. So there are some sort of things that temper my expectations here, but it is a very unique and exciting text box to have on a cycle-centric card. So again, it might be a critical piece for a combo deck here and there, but in Limited, looks fine. A 5 mana 4/4, not the best stats in the world, but passable at the very least. You can cycle it if you don't need it. So hey, again, at least somewhat Limited playable. But let's move on to the last couple of cards that are both really, really sweet. Let me just put it that way. Actually, are they the last couple? No. But all the cards are going to have to do with sharks, I think. I'm pretty sure. So let's move on to the last 3 cards. We got Pouncing Shore Shark right here. 5 mana, 4 and a blue for a 4/3 shark beast with mutate, 3 and a blue. It has flash, and whenever this creature mutates, you may return target creature an opponent controls to its owner's hand. So this again, but sort of Standard playable looking to me. Right? It takes up the same slot as a Frilled Mystic in a Flash deck, which I don't absolutely love, but at the same time, this is actually decent tempo. You get a good body with flash for only 4 mana and the tempo of returning something to somebody's hands. So that's, it's not bad. It's probably not as good as Frilled Mystic. It's nowhere near as good as like a Brazen Borrower either, so I kind of worry about it in standard play, but it might be worth a slot or two, depending on what the meta looks like in like a mono blue or a Cynic Flash deck. It actually could work out. This is desirable tempo on a pretty decent body that'll at least trade, if nothing else. You know, just this could absolutely wreck combat if you have another creature on the board. So seems good. Seems like a headache to me. Kill one of your opponent's creatures, bounce another one on their combat step. Yes, I like that an awful lot. If nothing else, this is a fantastic limited playable card, but I honestly think it might be like 2-of playable in a standard deck here or there, so keep your eye out for it. But let's move on. I hope I'm right about that. But here's Ominous Seas right here. Oh, it's not a shark, it's krakens. I apologize, but still big sea monsters. It's 1 and a blue for an enchantment. Whenever you draw a card, put an omen counter on Ominous Seas. Remove 8 omen counters. Create an 8/8 blue kraken creature token. This also has cycling too, so you can cycle it and then play it later with that creature we were just looking at, the 5 mana red thing. But honestly, I think this just looks like a pretty decent like control card. You can get it down on turn 2. Hopefully you're not playing against a deck that'll just completely wreck you if you skip your turn 2. And this could go in more than a control deck. It could go in the various ramp decks that we see, Sultai, Bant Ramp, even Simic Ramp. This could go in because those decks tend to draw a fair amount of cards due to cards like Hydroid Krasis and Euro and Growth Spiral and all that. So this could actually see a lot of play in those decks because it's not going to be hard to get to 8 counters. And do note, one of the most important things about the card is that when you remove the 8 counters, you don't sacrifice Ominous Seas, so it's possible to get multiple Krakens in a game off of this. Also, when you cast things, I've already said Hydroid Krasis, but cards like Gadwick and the Blue Finale, for instance, Expansion Explosion, all of these cards draw you a ton of cards all at one time, so they could just pay you off an 8/8 Kraken at the same time, and that seems absolutely nuts. Crazy. You know, Teferi draws you cards. There's just so many ways of drawing cards in this format right now that I think it's going to be a lot easier to get to 8 counters on this than you might think. So, and your opponent has to answer either the enchantment or the Kraken. If you get a Kraken out of it, they have to answer the Kraken and the enchantment, or you'll get another Kraken before too long. So, just seems like a nutso card to me, and I think this absolutely will see some amount of standard play. But let's keep it moving because now we got to look at my favorite card from the last couple of days, and that is Shark Typhoon. Sharknado, they're not even being subtle. The Sharknado is a standard playable Magic card right now. This costs 6 mana, sort of. 5 and a blue for an enchantment. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, create an XX blue shark creature token with flying, where X is that spell's converted mana cost. Or, here's the important part, you can cycle it for X and 1 and a blue. When you cycle Shark Typhoon, create an XX blue shark creature token with flying. So I actually think both modes on this card are playable. Right? You know, I think that the sort of what's the fail case on this, right? Just like cycling it for 2 mana, which isn't bad. And then I guess the next fail case is cycling it and getting a 1/1 flyer at instant speed, which is also kind of not bad. when you think about it, you know, it's no Hydroid Krasis, but it goes along with Hydroid Krasis and all the decks that play Hydroid Krasis, you know, including the more sort of control-centric Bant lists. I think this goes very, very well in, but this is just a fantastic blue card with a couple of different modes that are going to be amazing. You know, if say you play it in Sultai and you actually get it onto the battlefield, well then every Growth Spiral is worth a 2/2 flyer, every Liliana is worth a 6/6 flyer, but that's not the, you know, mode on this card that I'm more interested in. I'm most interested in cycling this and getting a huge shark in the late game. Again, all the ramp makes that much, much easier. You got a Nissa on the battlefield, suddenly you're getting a huge shark. You're getting an enormous shark, but even in just a basic control deck where you get to gain, you know, turn 13 or something, just cycling this and getting, you know, a 6/6 or 7/7 shark and also drawing a card is going to win you the game, you know. I've talked about this on a couple of cards so far in this spoiler season, but this is yet another sort of control finisher kind of card that makes it so you don't even have to really play creatures in your deck whatsoever, and that's really important for a few reasons right now. But just, oh God, I feel like I'm just running through all the crazy things about this card, but maybe the most important thing I haven't mentioned yet is that it gets over Teferi in a couple of ways. You know, like, Teferi doesn't let you cast spells when it's not your turn, but it doesn't say anything about cycling cards. Cycling cards ain't casting spells. It's not the same thing. So at the end of your opponent's turn, you can cycle this, create a shark big enough to swing into and kill the Teferi, and that might actually make Teferi a whole lot less playable in and of itself. So keep that in mind. For meta purposes, you've got that to look forward to. But again, all the same decks that play Teferi are going to be playing this card. I mean, just final word on this. I think the flexibility makes this amazingly playable. Again, even in the fail case where, like, it's turn 3, you haven't drawn Shatter the Sky, you're playing against aggro, you decide you have to cycle this to try to find that Shatter. Still a fine application. It's still a good application for a card like this. But, you know, you play a couple of copies of it in your deck, and in the late game, you top deck it when you've got all the mana open to you. Suddenly, it's a ridiculous card that ambushes something during your opponent's combat step and draws your card and swings in the next turn. It's just, to me, this card looks kind of unbelievable and like one of the strongest cards in the set. No joke. But so far, that is everything from Friday and Saturday for the Ikoria main set. I will be putting out a video, very likely tomorrow, just covering all the commander stuff that we've seen. I might just cover all the commanders, all the legendary creatures that we've released so far. I might kind of rank them. That would be fun, but I kind of want to point out all the fun new commander stuff. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. Let me know in the comments section. But I'm really kind of leaning towards ranking the commanders. But either way, we'll be talking about the commander product in the next day or so here. And then it's back to spoiler season for the next week. So make sure you subscribe to the channel for more of this if you enjoy this. Like the video as well if you enjoy this. And I suppose that I'm more or less done for now. Just let me know in the comments section anything I missed down there, you know, or any applications that I may have futzed up. You know, yesterday I missed that 5 mana red card let you target your opponent's creatures and make them fight each other, and that the entire comment section is about that. So, you know, if I mess up one thing, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have messed that up. But still, I also pinned a comment that said, like, keep telling me that I made this mistake, make sure I learn this lesson, but maybe I didn't learn the lesson and I made a horrible mistake in this video. You'll be sure to inform me of it down there in the comments section. But also let me know any combos or interactions that I missed. Maybe there's a combo in these cards that completely breaks Legacy and I don't know. People are talking about a couple of combos with Lion's Eye Diamond, but I never pay attention to that. So, but anyway, I think I'm done for now. So make sure you do all the YouTube stuff. Check out the Patreon to support this content. If you want to pre-order anything from this set, check out the link in the description and go to TCG Player. Order it through there. Help out you dude. But I guess I'm pretty much done for now. So I'll catch you cats later. I'm Dev from the place. Thanks for watching, my wizards. Spread love and be kind.